Short exercise 22-9, schedule of cash receipts. So a DT company expects total sales of $262,500 in January and $306,250 in February. Assume that a DT company's sales are collected as follows. So we can view a DT company's sales collection schedule here. And then the problem continues. It says in November sales totaled $300,000 and December sales were $325,000. Prepare a schedule of cash receipts from the customers for January and February, including the calculation for the net accounts receivable balance on February 28th. Round answers to the nearest dollar. If an input field is not used in the table, leave the input field empty. Do not enter a zero. So here we have prepare a schedule of cash receipts from customers for January and February. If an input field is not used in the table, leave the input field empty. Do not enter a zero. So when we do a cash budget, the two main parts are the cash receipts and the cash payments. So on this exercise, we're working to get these two numbers right here. 442,400 and 502,800. Note these numbers do not coincide with this problem. This is just an example of a cash budget. So in this exercise, we're going to figure out how much cash we're going to receive in each month. So when we review the sales collection schedule, 50% of sales is collected in the month of the sale. Then a month later, 30% after that sale is made, and then 18% is collected 2 months after the sales, and then 2% is never collected. So let's start out by getting our total sales in, and that's given to us at the beginning of the problem. So we have this DT company expects total sales of 262,500. So try to copy paste, looks like not today. So we'll go ahead and enter that in, 262,500 for January, and then we have 306,250 for February. So then our next task here under cash receipts from customers, we have to figure out of the November credit sales, how many will be collected in January. So in November, it says we have sales total 300,000. And again, how many months later is January? That is 2 months. So we'll go over here to our sales collection schedule and see that is 18% 2 months after the sales is collected. So we'll take that 300,000 and multiply it by the 18%. So we can pop open that calculator, and then we will take, put that right here, 300,000 times 18% or 0.18. So that's going to give us 54,000 for January here. So we can enter that in. And then for December, we had sales of 325,000. So here they're asking about the December sales, the credit sales collected of December sales in January. So how many months later is this? This is the month after December. So it's going to be 30% in the month after the sale. So what we're going to take here is take the 325,000 and multiply that by 30% since we are receiving a month after the sale, and that gives us 97,500. So make sure we input that here under January for the December credit sales. And then next up, let's figure out how many of the December credit sales we collect in February. So again, that is 2 months later. So that is 18% 2 months after the sale. So let's go ahead and collect that. That's going to give us, out of the December sales of 325,000, and multiply that by 18%. And that's going to give us 58,500. And again, we are collecting this in December. We are collecting this in February. So we'll go ahead and enter that under February. And we're going to move down our table to see what's next. We have January credit sales collection of January sales in January. So it's in the month of sale. So that is 50% in the month of sale. And again, this is January sales. So that's this 262,500 in January, and that is going to be multiplied by that 50% there, since we are talking about collecting this in the same month. So we'll go ahead and multiply this by 50, and that is going to give us 131,250 collected in January. And then next up we have January credit sales, collection of January sales in February, so it is being collected the month after. So that is 30% of this 262,500, since we are talking about January sales. So we're going to go ahead and take 262,500 and multiply that by 30. And that is going to give us 78,750. And again, this is being collected in February, so it's going to go under the February column here. Okay, now we have February credit sales, collection of February sales in February. Wow, say that fast 3 times. So this one is going to be this 306,250. And since we are collecting it in the same month, that is 50% in the month of sale for our sales collection schedule there. So 306,250 multiplied by that 50%, and that is going to give us 153,125. And again, collected in February, so it's going to go in this column here. Okay, and then we are going to total these up. So for January, that is going to give us a grand total here of 282,750. And then for February, that is 290,375. So now that we've completed this cash receipts from customers, let's check our answer. Well done. Okay. So now we're moving on to determine the net accounts receivable balance on February 28th. So basically at the beginning of March, we need to know how much our AR is. So let's look at the November sales. So these November sales, how much would be collected in March? Well, looking at our chart of sales here that are collected, I should say our AR collected only is only done in the first 2 months after the sale. So 50% in the month of the sale, 30% in the month after, and then 18% 2 months after the sale. So again, for AR, we're only collecting in the first 2 months, and anything after those first 2 months is never collected. Because remember, all 4 of these add up to 100%. So we're only collecting in the first 2 months. So for November sales, we would collect in November and then 2 months after. So that's December and January. So these all have been collected, this 300,000. So we have no more AR from November. And for December, AR is collected in December and then 2 months after. So that's January and February. So nothing would be collected in March. And then so how about January sales? Well, how much would be collected in March, which is 2 months after. So 2 months after the sale, we're going to collect 18%. So remember, this is net AR at the end of February or the beginning of March. However you want to say it, it represents how much we have not collected yet. So for this first part here in the net AR receivable balance for February 28th, that is going to be January credit sales, collection of January sales in March. So how much of the January credit sales of 262,500 will be collected 2 months after? Again, that is 18%. So we get our calculator out and get that open. So we have 262,500 and multiply that by 18% to give us 47,250. Go ahead and enter that in. So now let's talk about the February sales. So how much of February sales will be collected after February? So that label is going to be February credit sales, a collection of February sales in March. So that is 30% in the month after the sale, because March is after February. So we're going to have the 306,250 total sales multiplied by that 30%. So that's going to give us 306,250 multiplied by 30%. And that is going to give us 91,875 included in the AR at February 28th there for the February credit sales. And then next we have February credit sales, collection of February sales in April. So how much of our February sales of this 306,250 will be collected in April? Well, that is 2 months after the sale, so it's going to be 18% of that 306,250 in sales. So let's go ahead and enter that in correctly. Looks like it froze on me for a second. So we have 306,250, and then we're going to multiply that by 18%, and that is going to give us 55,125. And then we're going to add up our net accounts receivable balance on February 28th. So add these three here, and that is going to give us a total of 194,250. And we can go ahead and close out of our sales chart there, our calculator, and check our answer. Excellent.